Welcome, weary traveler. Come in from the cold, settle by the fire, and let the warmth wrap around you like a familiar blanket. Tonight, we return once more to the Crossroads Inn, where an old diary waits to share its secrets. In these pages, the innkeeper has written of a figure known only as the Lantern Bearer, a quiet soul who walked the darkest roads carrying light for those who had lost their way. So close your eyes if you wish, breathe deeply, and let the innkeeper's words carry you gently into the night.
The seventh day of the falling leaves moon. The wind has changed. I felt it this morning when I opened the door to check the wood pile, that particular bite in the air that speaks of coming frost. The oak tree at the crossroads has surrendered most of its leaves now, and they gather in great drifts along the edges of the road like amber waves frozen mid-curl. Autumn is releasing its grip finger by finger, and soon the world will belong to winter once more. I spent the better part of the morning preparing for the transition. The root cellar is well stocked, praise be, with turnips and carrots and beets nestled in straw, and the onions hang in long braids from the ceiling beams like prayers made solid. The woodshed is nearly full, though I should split another cord before the ground freezes too hard. There is something deeply satisfying about this work, this preparation. It connects me to my father, who taught me that an inn lives or dies by its readiness for what comes next. The common room feels different in this season. The light through the windows arrives at a lower angle, painting long golden rectangles across the flagstones that shift and stretch as the hours pass. I find myself pausing in my work sometimes just to watch the way the dust motes drift through those slanted beams. Spinning slowly like the last dancers at a country wedding, there is beauty in the ordinary, if one remembers to look for it. Only 2 guests last night. A wool merchant named Corwin traveling south with the last of his summer stock, hoping to reach the lowland markets before the roads turn to mud. He is a quiet man, with hands roughened by years of handling fleece, and he speaks of his sheep the way some men speak of children. I learned that he names each one, that he can tell them apart not just by markings but by personality. The one he calls Bramble, he told me, always walks at the edge of the flock, keeping watch. She has done so since she was a lamb, and he has never understood why. The other guest was a woman traveling alone, which is unusual enough to note. She gave her name as Marin and said she was heading west to join family on one of the new homesteads. She had the kind of face that holds its secrets close, but her eyes were kind, and she thanked me 3 times for the stew. 3 times! As if gratitude were a coin she was afraid to spend all at once. Both left at first light, Corwin south and Marin west, their paths splitting at the crossroads like threads from the same spool, unwinding in different directions. I stood at the door and watched until they disappeared, which did not take long. The morning mist was thick today, and they faded into it like figures in a dream, substantial one moment and then simply gone. The white candle burned steady through it all, its flame unwavering even when the draft from the open door should have troubled it. I have stopped questioning this. Some things simply are, and the candle is one of them. It burns without diminishing, a light that asks nothing except to be allowed to shine. There is wisdom in that, I think. Or perhaps I am just an old innkeeper, finding meaning where there is only wax and wick. This afternoon I received an unexpected visitor, though visitor is perhaps not the right word. The word suggests someone who arrives and departs, and I'm not certain this man did either. I was in the kitchen kneading bread dough when I heard the front door open, the hinges need oiling again, and they announce it's every entrance with a low creak that travels through the whole building like a spoken word. I wiped the flour from my hands and went to greet whoever had arrived. The common room was empty. I stood there for a long moment, certain I had heard the door. The fire crackled in the hearth. The candle flame burned steady on its shelf above the mantel. Nothing else moved. Then I noticed the muddy footprints. They led from the door to one of the tables near the window, the small one where travelers sometimes sit alone to watch the crossroads while they eat. The prints were fresh, the mud still wet and dark against the flagstones, but there was no one at the table, no one anywhere in the room. I followed the prints with my eyes, tracking them from door to table. They simply stopped, as if whoever had made them had sat down and then ceased to exist. I am not a man who frightens easily. 13 years of keeping this in have taught me that the world holds more mysteries than explanations, and most of those mysteries mean no harm. But I confess, my heart beat faster as I stood there, studying those prints, trying to understand what I was seeing. Then I noticed something else. On the table where no one sat, there was a single drop of water, just one, sitting on the worn wooden surface like a tiny lens. And beside it, so faint I almost missed it, the outline of a circle drawn in moisture, as if someone had set down a wet cup and then taken it away again. I do not know what to make of this. I cleaned the footprints and wiped the table, and I went back to my bread, and the afternoon passed as afternoons do, but I cannot stop thinking about that circle, that suggestion of presence without presence. Whoever made those prints, wherever they went, they stopped here first. They sat at my table, and then they were gone before I could offer them anything at all. Perhaps tomorrow will bring answers. Perhaps it will bring only more questions. Either way, I will be here, and the fire will be lit, and the door will open for whoever needs to pass through it. The 8th day of the falling leaves moon. The morning brought frost, the first true frost of the season. I woke before dawn to a world transformed, every surface glazed with crystals that caught the early light and scattered it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. The oak tree at the crossroads looked like something from an old tale, its bare branches coated in ice that glittered against the pale sky. Even the muddy ruts in the road had frozen solid, holding their shapes like memories made permanent. I spent an hour breaking the ice on the water trough in the stable before the horses could drink. They watched me work with patient eyes, their breath blooming white in the cold air. The gray mare, who has been with me longest, pressed her nose against my shoulder as if to offer comfort, or perhaps to ask for it. Animals understand things we do not, I think. They feel the turning of the seasons in their bones, and they accept it without argument or complaint. Today brought more travelers than yesterday. 3 parties in total, which feels almost busy after the quiet of recent days. The first to arrive was a family, a husband and wife, with 2 young children, traveling south to spend the winter with relatives. The wife's name was Helene, and she had the kind of tired smell that speaks of long roads and longer worries. The children, a boy of perhaps 7 years and a girl a few years younger, were bright-eyed and curious, their exhaustion pushed aside by the novelty of a new place. The boy asked me 17 questions before his mother gently told him to let the innkeeper work. I did not mind. There is something refreshing about a child's curiosity, the way they see wonder in things we have long since stopped noticing. The second party was a pair of merchants, partners in trade, carrying bolts of dyed cloth from the coastal towns toward the western homesteads. They were easy men, quick to laugh and quicker to haggle, though there was nothing to haggle over here. They paid their coin without complaint and asked only for hot food and a dry place to sleep. I gave them both, and they settled by the fire with the contentment of men who know how to appreciate simple comforts. The third arrival came late, after the sun had set and the others had retired to their rooms. I was banking the fire for the night when I heard the door creak open, and I turned to find a man standing on the threshold, framed by the darkness behind him. He was tall and thin, with a face weathered by years of sun and wind, and he carried a lantern in each hand. Not one lantern, but 2, both lit, their flames burning steady despite the cold wind that swirled around him. He wore a heavy cloak the color of old leaves, and his boots were caked with mud that had dried and cracked into patterns like the bark of an ancient tree. I have seen many travelers in my years at this inn. I have learned to read them quickly, to assess their needs and their natures in the time it takes them to cross from door to fire. But this man I could not read. His face was calm, his eyes steady, but there was something in his bearing that suggested he had come from very far away, and that the journey had changed him in ways I could not name. He said nothing at first, simply stood there, holding his lanterns, letting the cold air swirl past him into the room. Then slowly he smiled. It was a gentle smile, tired around the edges, but genuine. "I am called the Lantern Bearer," he said, "and I have walked a long way to reach your crossroads." I invited him in, of course. Hospitality is not conditional. Not here. I hung his cloak by the fire and brought him stew from the pot that still simmered in the kitchen, and I watched as he ate with the careful attention of someone who knows the value of every meal. The lanterns he had carried, he set on the table beside him, and even indoors, even near the warmth of the fire, their flames did not waver or dim. When he had finished eating, He looked at me with those steady eyes and asked if I knew why the roads were so dark in autumn. I told him I supposed it was because the days grew shorter and the nights grew longer, which seemed obvious enough. He nodded as if I had passed some small test. "Yes," he said, "the nights grow longer, but it is more than that. In autumn, the world is letting go. The leaves fall, the animals sleep, the earth prepares for silence. And in that letting go, things become harder to see. The paths that were clear in summer grow shadowed. Travelers lose their way." He paused, and his hands moved to rest on the lanterns beside him, one palm on each, as if drawing warmth from them. "That is why I walk," he said. "I carry light to the places where light is needed. I find the lost travelers, the ones who have wandered from the road, and I guide them back." I asked him how he knew where to find them, these lost travelers. He smiled again, that tired, gentle smile. "I do not find them," he said. "They find me, or rather, my light finds them. These lanterns have burned for a very long time, longer than I can remember, and they know where they are needed even when I do not." I confess I did not entirely understand what he meant, but there was a sincerity in his voice that made me believe him, even if I could not explain what I was believing. He spoke of his lanterns the way Corwin spoke of his sheep, the way my father used to speak of this inn, as if they were not just objects, but companions, partners in some greater work. He asked if he might stay the night, and I told him he was welcome for as long as he needed. He thanked me and asked which room was available, and when I told him, he gathered his lanterns and climbed the stairs, his footsteps slow and measured on the worn wooden steps. I sat alone in the common room for a long time after he had gone. The fire burned low, and the white candle flickered on the mantel, and I thought about light, about how easy it is to take for granted, and how precious it becomes when it is gone. The 9th day of the falling leaves moon, I did not sleep well last night, not from worry or discomfort, but from dreams. Strange dreams, vivid and lingering, that clung to me even after I woke. I dreamed I was walking a road I did not recognize, a road that wound through a forest so dark the trees were only suggestions of shape against a deeper darkness. I was lost, thoroughly lost, and the cold was creeping into my bones like water into sand. And then, in the distance, I saw a light. 2 lights, actually, bobbing gently as if carried by someone walking. I moved toward them without deciding to, drawn by the simple promise of illumination in all that darkness. As I drew closer, I saw that the lights were lanterns, and the man carrying them was tall and thin, with a face weathered by years of sun and wind. He turned when I reached him, and he smiled. "I have been looking for you," he said, and I woke. The lantern bearer was already awake when I came downstairs, sitting at the same table where he had eaten last night. his lanterns burning steady beside him. He had found the bread I had baked yesterday and had helped himself to a thick slice spread with honey. I did not mind. A guest who feels comfortable enough to serve himself is a guest who feels at home. We spoke for a long time this morning while the other travelers slept and the fire crackled and the frost on the windows slowly melted in the growing light. He told me of the roads he had walked, the places he had seen. He spoke of mountain passes where the wind howls like a living thing, of forests where the trees grow so close together that even noon feels like twilight, of marshlands where the ground shifts beneath your feet and the mist rises thick enough to taste. He told me of the travelers he had found in these places. A merchant who had taken a wrong turn in the mountains and spent 3 days wandering in circles, convinced he was moving forward when he was only going around and around the same peak. A family whose wagon had slipped off a muddy road in the night, stranding them in a gully while the rain poured down and the darkness pressed close. A child who had wandered away from a caravan chasing a butterfly and had not noticed when the road disappeared behind her. In each case, he said, his lanterns had led him to them. He would be walking some distant road, thinking of nothing in particular, and one of the lanterns would flicker, just once, barely noticeable. But he had learned to pay attention to that flicker. It meant someone was lost. It meant someone needed light. I asked him if he ever grew tired of walking, of searching, of carrying light into the darkness. He considered the question for a long moment, turning his empty cup in his hands the way travelers do when they are thinking. Then he said something that I have been pondering ever since. Everyone carries light, he said. Everyone has something within them that can illuminate the way for others. But most people do not realize it. They think their light is too small, too dim, too insignificant to matter. So they keep it hidden. They walk through the world carrying a lantern they never think to lift. He set down his cup and looked at me with those steady eyes. You understand this, he said. I can tell. This inn is your lantern. You lift it every night, and travelers find their way to it. You do not walk the roads as I do, but you carry light all the same. I did not know what to say to this. I felt the truth of his words settle into me like warmth from the fire, but I also felt unworthy of them. I am only an innkeeper. I keep the fire burning and the stew simmering and the beds made. I do not think of myself as carrying light. Perhaps that is why your light burns so steady, he said, as if he had heard my thoughts. You do not think about it. You simply do it. That is the best kind of light, the kind that shines without trying. He rose then and gathered his lanterns and told me he would walk the crossroads today. Not leaving, not yet, just walking. He wanted to feel the shape of the place, he said. He wanted to understand where the roads led and where they came from. I watched him go, his tall figure disappearing down the east road, his lanterns bobbing gently in the gray morning light, and I thought about what he had said, about carrying light, about lifting it for others to see. The family left this morning, heading south, with the hope of reaching the lowland settlements before the real cold sets in. Helene thanked me for the warmth and the food, and her husband pressed a few extra coins into my hand, more than the room was worth. I tried to refuse, but he insisted. For the children, he said, nodding toward the fire where the boy and girl were gathering their things. They slept well here. That is worth more than coin. I stood at the door and watched them go the same way I had watched Corwin and Marin disappear into the mist 2 days before. The children turned to wave, and I waved back, and then they were around the bend and gone. The merchants left too, heading west with their bolts of cloth, their horses laden with color that seemed almost defiant against the gray autumn landscape. They were cheerful in their departure, full of plans and predictions about the markets ahead. One of them told me he would stop here again on his return, in spring perhaps, and I told him I would have stew waiting. By mid-morning, the inn was empty except for me and the lantern-bearer's presence somewhere out on the roads. I used the quiet to clean the rooms, to change the straw in the mattresses, to sweep the floors and wipe down the tables. There is a rhythm to this work that I find comforting. It is honest labor, visible and measurable. When I am done, I can see what I have accomplished. In a world full of mysteries I cannot explain, there is something satisfying about a floor that has been swept clean. The lantern-bearer reddened in the late afternoon as the light was beginning to fail. He looked different somehow. Not tired exactly, but thoughtful, as if his walk had shown him something he was still trying to understand. He sat by the fire and accepted the tea I offered, wrapping his hands around the cup, the way travelers do when they need warmth more than drink. His lanterns sat on the floor beside him, their flames still burning steady, despite having been carried all day through the autumn wind. "There is something here," he said finally, "at your crossroads. Something I have not felt in a long time." I asked him what he meant. He shook his head slowly. "I am not certain," he said. "But the roads here, they feel different, as if they remember more than other roads, as if the ground itself holds the weight of every traveler who has ever passed through." He looked at me, and there was something in his eyes that might have been wonder or might have been concern. I am not sure which. "Do you ever feel it?" he asked. "The weight of all those journeys?" I thought about the question carefully before answering. I told him that I had never thought of it quite that way. But yes, sometimes, late at night, when the inn is quiet and I sit here by the fire, I feel something, a presence that is not quite presence, a sense of all the people who have come before, all the stories they carried, all the hopes and fears and secrets they brought to this place and then carried away again. He nodded, as if I'd confirmed something he already suspected. "That is the weight," he said. "That is what makes a crossroads powerful. It is not just a place where roads meet. It is a place where lives meet, where journeys intersect, where people pause and decide which way to go. All of that choosing, all of that uncertainty, it leaves something behind. It soaks into the earth like rain. He fell silent then, staring into the fire, and I did not disturb him. Some thoughts need silence to fully form. After a while, he looked up at me again. "I would like to stay another night," he said, "if you have room." I told him I had room, and I meant it. Not just the room upstairs, but room in this place. Room for his quiet presence and his strange wisdom and his lanterns that burned without burning down. He nodded his thanks and climbed the stairs, and I was alone again with the fire and the candle and the growing darkness outside the windows. The 10th day of the falling leaves, moon. Another night of dreams, but different this time. Not the dark forest and the wandering road. Instead, I dreamed of this inn, of standing in the doorway and looking out at the crossroads and seeing it filled with light. Hundreds of lanterns, perhaps thousands, hovering in the air above the road, each one casting its small circle of illumination until the whole crossroads glowed like a captured sunrise. And in the dream, I understood something. The lanterns were not just light. They were people. Each flame was someone who had passed through this place, someone who had rested here and eaten here and slept here and then moved on. The light they left behind was not visible in waking, but it was there all the same. It was always there. I woke with tears on my face, though I could not say whether they were tears of joy or sorrow or something else entirely. The lantern bearer was in the common room when I came downstairs, but he was not alone. Sitting across from him at the table by the window was an old woman I did not recognize. She wore a shawl the color of twilight, and her hair was white as snow, and her hands resting on the table were thin and spotted with age. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs, uncertain whether to interrupt, but the lantern bearer looked up and smiled and gestured for me to join them. "This is the one I told you about," he said to the old woman, "the keeper of this place." She turned to look at me, and her eyes were the strangest eyes I have ever seen. They were not old. Everything else about her was old, worn by years and weather and the weight of time. But her eyes were young, clear and bright, like the eyes of a child seeing the world for the first time. "You have taken good care of this place," she said. Her voice was soft, barely louder than the crackling of the fire, but it carried clearly across the room. "He would be proud of you." I asked her who she meant. "Your father," she said. "He built this inn with his own hands, and he poured his heart into every beam and stone. I remember when he was young, when he first came to this crossroads with nothing but a dream and a handful of coins. I remember when he met your mother, and when you were born, and when he taught you to read by the light of that same fire." I felt my breath catch in my throat. I asked her how she knew these things. She smiled, and there was something in that smile that reminded me of the old woman who had come in the first winter, the one who'd given me the white candle. But it could not be the same woman. That was impossible. That woman would be, I could not even calculate how old she would be now. "I know many things," she said. "I have walked these roads for a very long time, longer than the roads themselves in some ways. The lantern bearer was watching this exchange with a calm expression, as if nothing about it surprised him. He lifted one of his lanterns and held it toward the old woman, and its light seemed to brighten just slightly in her presence. "She has been walking since before the roads were built," he said, "since before the first crossroads were marked. She is one of the old ones, the ones who remember." I did not understand what he meant by this, and I said so. The old woman laughed, a sound like wind chimes stirring in a gentle breeze. "You do not need to understand," she said. "Understanding is not required, only acceptance, only welcome." She reached across the table and took my hand, and her touch was warmer than I expected, warmer than the fire or the tea or the lantern light. "You have made this place a beacon," she said, "a light in the darkness. Your father began the work, but you have continued it, and you have done it well. The travelers who pass through here, they feel safe, they feel welcome. That is a gift beyond measure." I tried to respond, but my voice caught in my throat. I felt suddenly overwhelmed, not by fear or confusion, but by the weight of recognition, as if she was saying things I had always known, but had never allowed myself to believe. She released my hand and rose from the table, and her movements were slow but graceful, like a candle flame bending in a breeze. "I must go," she said. "The roads are calling. But I wanted to see you, to thank you, to let you know that your light is seen. It reaches further than you know." She walked to the door, and I followed her, wanting to say something, anything, but not knowing what words would be enough. The lantern bearer rose too, gathering his lanterns, preparing to follow. At the door, the old woman paused and looked back at me. "Remember this," she said. "Every candle lit is a darkness defeated. Every traveler welcomed is a loneliness eased. You do not have to walk the roads as he does." She nodded toward the lantern bearer. "Your place is here. Your light is here, but it is no less important for being still." And then she was gone, stepping out into the gray morning light and disappearing around the corner of the stable, as if she had never been there at all. The lantern bearer lingered a moment longer. "I will walk with her for a while," he said, "but I will return before nightfall. There is something I want to show you." I asked him what it was. He smiled. "You will see." And then he too was gone, his tall figure following the old woman's path around the stable, his lanterns bobbing gently in the cold air. I stood in the doorway for a long time after they had left. The crossroads stretched out before me, the roads leading north and south and east and west, each one disappearing into the great distance like a question waiting to be answered. The oak tree stood silent and patient, its bare branches reaching toward the sky like fingers grasping for something just out of reach. I thought about what the old woman had said, about light and darkness, about welcoming and loneliness, about the work my father had begun and I had continued. I thought about all the travelers who had passed through this place, all the meals I had served and beds I had made, and fires I had kept burning through long, cold nights. And I wondered, for the first time in a long time, whether I had been doing something more than just running an inn. Whether, without knowing it, I had been carrying a light of my own. The morning passed quietly. I cleaned and cooked and prepared for whatever travelers might arrive. The same work I had done every day for 13 years. The same work my father had done before me. But it felt different now, or perhaps I felt different about it. I cannot say which. In the early afternoon, a cart arrived from the south, carrying a family of farmers who had come to trade vegetables at a market in one of the northern settlements. They were simple people, weathered by sun and soil, and they asked only for a meal and a place to rest their horses. I gave them both, and we sat together in the common room while they ate, and they told me about their farm, about the harvest that had been good this year, about their oldest son who had married in the spring and was expecting his first child before winter ended. Ordinary people with ordinary lives, carrying ordinary hopes. But as I listened to them speak, I found myself seeing them differently. Each of them was a light, I realized. Each of them carried something within them that could illuminate the darkness for someone else. The farmer with his weathered hands and patient eyes, his wife with her quick laugh and her stories about the village children she used to teach. Their daughter, quiet and watchful, who I noticed was sketching something in a small book she carried, capturing the common room in careful lines of charcoal. They left in the late afternoon, continuing north toward the market, promising to stop again on their way home. And I stood at the door and watched them go, the same way I had watched so many travelers go before. But this time, I was watching for something different. I was watching for the light they carried, the small illumination they brought into the world and carried with them wherever they went. The lantern bearer returned as he had promised, just as the sun was setting behind the western hills. He came alone, the old woman having continued on her own road, wherever that road led. His lanterns burned steady in the growing darkness, two small points of fire against the twilight. He asked if I was ready, and I said I supposed I was, though I did not know what I was supposed to be ready for. He smiled and said, "Come with me." We walked together to the crossroads, to the place where the four roads met beneath the ancient oak. The last light of day was fading, and the sky was turning from gold to purple to the deep blue that comes just before true darkness. The first stars were appearing, faint and far away, like distant lanterns in a cosmic inn. The lantern bearer set his lanterns on the ground, one on either side of him, and then he looked at me. "Watch," he said, and I watched. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just the crossroads as it always was, the road stretching away into the darkness, the oak tree standing silent and patient, the inn behind us, with its windows glowing warm and welcoming. But then, slowly, something began to change. The air itself seemed to shimmer, as if heat were rising from the ground, though the evening was cold. And in that shimmer, I began to see shapes, faint at first, barely visible, but growing clearer with each passing moment. They were people, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, standing at the crossroads, gathered around the oak tree, filling the roads in every direction. They were translucent, like memories made visible, and they came from every time and every place. I saw men and women and children. I saw merchants and farmers and soldiers and scholars. I saw the old and the young, the weary and the hopeful, the lost and the found. I saw my father. He stood among them, younger than I remembered him, his hair still dark, his face not yet lined by the years of work and worry that had marked him in the end. He was smiling, looking at me across the shimmer of years, and though he did not speak, I heard him as clearly as if he were standing beside me. "You are doing well," he said. "I am proud of you." And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they were gone. The shimmer faded, the shapes dissolved, and I was standing at the crossroads with the lantern bearer, the darkness settling around us like a familiar blanket. "Every traveler who has ever passed through this place," the lantern bearer said softly, "they leave something behind, a piece of their light. And that light gathers here, at the crossroads, in the earth and the air, and the ancient roots of that oak tree." He picked up his lanterns and turned to face me. "This is why you're in matters," he said. "This is why you matter. You're the keeper of all that light. You tend it and protect it and add to it with every traveler you welcome, the fire you keep burning, the meals you serve, the beds you make. All of it feeds the light. All of it makes this place what it is." I could not speak. I was still seeing my father's face, still hearing his words, still feeling the truth of what the lantern bearer was telling me settle into my bones like warmth from a fire. He placed a hand on my shoulder, and his touch was gentle. "I will leave in the morning," he said. "There are other roads to walk, other travelers to find, but I wanted you to see this. I wanted you to know what you are part of." We walked back to the inn together, and the darkness was no longer just darkness. It was full of light, invisible but present, surrounding us like the embrace of an old friend. The 11th day of the falling leaves moon. He left at dawn, as he had said he would. I rose early to see him off, to press a bundle of bread and cheese into his hands for the road, to thank him for what he had shown me. He accepted the food with grace and thanked me in return for the shelter and the warmth and the conversations we had shared. At the door, he paused and looked back at me one last time. "Keep your light burning," he said, "and remember that you are never alone here. The crossroads holds more company than you can see." I told him I would remember, and I have. I'm writing it down now so that I will not forget, so that when the long winter nights come and the doubts creep in, I can read these words and remember what I saw at the crossroads, what I learned from the lantern bearer about the light I carry without knowing. He walked to east toward the coastal towns and the sea beyond. I watched until his lanterns were just two tiny points of light in the morning mist. and then even those disappeared, swallowed by the gray distance. But I know He is out there still, walking, carrying light, finding the lost and guiding them home. And I'm here, doing the same in my own way, the 12th day of the falling leaves moon. I woke this morning thinking of lanterns. Not the lantern bearers' lanterns, specifically, though they were a part of it, but lanterns in general, the ones that hang in the stable that I light each evening so the horses do not stand in complete darkness, the ones that traveling merchants carry, swaying from the corners of their carts, the ones that fishermen's wives are said to place in windows along the eastern coast, guiding their husbands home through fog and storm. All over the world, I thought, people are lighting lanterns. All over the world, small flames are being struck against the darkness, each one a promise that someone cares, that someone is waiting, that the night will not last forever. It is a comforting thought. In a world that often feels vast and cold and indifferent, it is good to remember that everywhere, in every village and town and isolated homestead, there are people like me, people who tend fires, people who keep lights burning, people who understand in their bones, if not in their minds, that illumination is an act of faith. I spent some time this morning with the horses in the stable, just sitting with them in the quiet. The gray mare, whose name is Patience, though I rarely call her by it, came to stand beside me, her warm breath soft against my shoulder. Horses are wise creatures, I think. They understand things we do not, feel things we cannot. When I am troubled, Patience always seems to know, and she offers her presence the way some humans offer words. It is often more helpful. The day passed quietly after that. I checked the stocks in the root cellar, noting what we have plenty of and what might run short before spring. The onions are holding well, as are the carrots and beets, but the potatoes are beginning to sprout in their barrels. I will need to check them more frequently, remove the ones that are going soft before they spoil the rest. Such is the constant vigilance of winter, the ongoing battle against decay and loss. A quiet day which I welcomed after the strangeness of recent nights. Only one traveler arrived, a young woman named Eliza, who was traveling north to take a position as a governess in one of the mining settlements. She was nervous, I could tell, embarking on a new chapter of her life with nothing but hope and determination to guide her. I gave her my best room, the private one with the window that faces the mountains, and I made sure her stew had extra portions. She talked for a long time over dinner, perhaps because she needed to voice her fears aloud to make them manageable. She told me about the family she was leaving behind, about the letters of recommendation she carried, about the children she would be teaching, whose names she had memorized, even though she had never met them. I listened, as I always do, and when she fell silent, I told her something the lantern bearer had said. I told her that everyone carries light, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is lift that light and let others see it. She looked at me strangely when I said this, as if she was not sure whether I was speaking in metaphors or describing something real. But then she nodded slowly, and something in her expression softened. "I think I understand," she said. And she smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since she arrived. She left this morning, heading north with her trunk of books and her carefully written letters and her hope that she would be equal to the task ahead. I gave her an extra loaf of bread for the road and told her that if she ever passed this way again, she would be welcome. Everyone is welcome here. The 13th day of the fallen leaves. Moon. More frost this morning, heavier than before. When I woke and looked through the small window of my chamber, the world seemed made entirely of silver and white, every surface touched by the delicate crystals that form when cold air meets the lingering moisture of autumn. The kitchen garden is truly asleep now, the last of the herbs harvested and drying above the mantel. Winter is coming. I can feel it in the air, in the way the light seems thinner and more precious with each passing day. There is a particular beauty to frost that I've never tired of observing. The way it transforms the ordinary into something magical, coating every blade of grass and branch and stone in a glittering skin that catches the light and scatters it into tiny rainbows. When I was a child, my father would take me out on frosty mornings and show me how the ice formed in different patterns depending on the surface it clung to, how a spider's web became a jeweled masterpiece and a fallen leaf became a work of art. These memories stay with me, treasure held against the years. I spent the morning splitting wood, adding to the pile in the woodshed, preparing for the cold that is coming. It is hard work, but I find it satisfying. Each log I split is another guarantee against the darkness, another promise that the fire will keep burning no matter how long the night becomes. In the afternoon, a pair of traders arrived from the west carrying furs they hoped to sell in the eastern markets. They were rough men, hardened by the frontier, but they softened visibly when they stepped into the warmth of the common room. One of them, the older of the two, stood for a long moment by the fire, just breathing, letting the heat soak into him. "This is a good place," he said finally. "You can feel it in the air." I thanked him and brought them ale and stew, and they ate with the focused attention of men who had been too long on the road. Later, when they had finished, they sat by the fire and told stories of the Western territories, of the homesteads that appear and disappear depending on the season, of the strange lights that dance on the horizon when the winter storms blow in. One of them, the younger one, mentioned that he had once seen a man walking the frontier roads at night, carrying 2 lanterns that burned with an unusual steadiness. He had called out to the man, thinking him a fellow traveler, but the man had only smiled and waved and continued on his way, disappearing into the darkness as if the darkness had opened up to receive him. I asked if the man was tall and thin, with a face weathered by years of sun and wind. The trader looked at me with surprise. "You know him?" I told him that, yes, I knew him, that he had stayed here just a few days ago, and that he was a friend. The trader shook his head in wonder. "Strange company you keep, innkeeper," he said, "but I suppose in a place like this, strange company is to be expected. I did not argue with him. He was right after all. This crossroads attracts the unusual, the mysterious, the ones who walk between worlds. It always has, since long before I came here, since long before my father built the inn. The roads themselves seem to call to certain travelers, drawing them here like moths to a flame, or perhaps, I thought, like flames to other flames. The 14th day of the falling leaves, moon snow, today. Just a light dusting the first of the season, covering the ground in a thin white blanket that made the crossroads look like something from a dream. I stood at the window for a long time this morning, watching the flakes drift down, each one a tiny light catching the pale morning sun before settling into the greater whiteness below. The traders left early, heading east before the weather could worsen. They thanked me for the shelter and the stories and pressed a small bundle of furs into my hands as payment. Far more than the rooms were worth, but they insisted. For the cold nights ahead, the older one said, and because this place deserves more than coin can pay. I have the furs now, soft and warm, draped over the back of my chair. I will use them when winter truly sets in, when the nights grow so long that even the fire cannot fully chase away the chill. The white candle on the mantel seemed brighter today, its flame dancing in a way it usually does not. I wonder sometimes if it is trying to tell me something, this candle that never burns down, if it sees things I cannot see and knows things I cannot know. The old woman who gave it to me said it would be a light in the darkness. Perhaps it is more than that. Perhaps it is a reminder of all the lights that have gathered here, all the travelers who have come and gone, all the stories that have been shared beside this fire. The lantern bearer understood this, I think. He saw the crossroads for what it truly is, a gathering place for light, a nexus where the illumination of countless souls mingles and strengthens and grows. He carries his lanterns because he knows that light is the most precious thing in the world, more precious than gold or food or shelter. Without light, we are lost. Without light, we wander in darkness, unable to find our way. But with light, even the smallest light, we can see the path. We can find our way home. The 15th day of the falling leaves moon, another quiet day, which I am learning to appreciate. The snow has melted, leaving the ground damp and cold, and the sky is the color of old pewter, promising more snow to come. I spent the morning mending a tear in one of the stable blankets, and the afternoon preparing a pot of soup that will last for several days. Root vegetables and barley and a ham bone I have been saving simmered together until the broth turns thick and golden. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from making soup on a winter afternoon. The slow work of chopping vegetables, the fragrance of herbs added to the pot, the patient waiting as the heat transforms raw ingredients into something nourishing and warm. My mother used to say that soup was medicine you could eat before you were sick, a way of strengthening the body against whatever challenges might come. I think of her often when I cook, though it has been many years. since she passed. The kitchen garden, visible through the window above the work table, sleeps. Beneath a thin layer of frost, in spring it will wake again, and I will plant the seeds I have been saving, and the cycle will continue as it always has. There is comfort in cycles, in the knowledge that what ends will begin again, that what falls will rise, that what it is lost will return in some new form. I wonder sometimes if the travelers who pass through here understand how much they are part of a cycle, too. They arrive from somewhere and depart for somewhere else. Each one a link, a chain that stretches back through time to the first person who ever walked these roads, and each one leaves something behind, something invisible but real, a trace of their passage that becomes part of this place. The lantern bearer saw it. He showed it to me that night at the crossroads, the accumulated light of all those journeys, all those pauses, all those moments of rest and choice and continuation. It is still there, still gathering, still growing with every traveler who passes through. No travelers today. Sometimes days pass like this, especially as winter approaches. The roads become harder, the journey longer, and people think twice before setting out. I do not mind the quiet. It gives me time to think, to remember, to write. I have been thinking about what the lantern bearer said, about carrying light without knowing, about the inn being my lantern, lifted every night for travelers to find their way. It is a strange way to think of what I do, and yet it feels true. Truer than anything I've felt in a long time. I remember when I first took over the inn after my father died. I was young then, younger than I like to admit, and I was not sure I could do it. The inn seemed so large, the responsibility so heavy. There were nights when I sat by the fire, alone, wondering if I should simply close the doors and walk away. But I did not. Something kept me here. Something made me light the fire and make the beds and wait for travelers who might never come. I told myself it was duty, obligation, the weight of my father's memory pressing down on my shoulders. But now I wonder if it was something else. If some part of me, even then, understood what this place was, what it meant. The crossroads needs a keeper. It always has. Someone to tend the light, to welcome the weary, to hold space for the journeys that intersect here. My father knew this. The old woman who blessed the inn knew this. The lantern bearer knows this. And now, finally, I think I know it too. The 16th day of the fallen leaves moon. The dawn came slowly today, the sun struggling to rise through a bank of gray clouds that pressed down on the horizon like a heavy blanket. I stood at the window of my chamber and watched the light gradually strengthen, transforming the world from darkness to a kind of muted gray that seemed neither night nor day, but something in between. In these moments between states, I often feel closest to understanding something important about the nature of things. The crossroads exists in a between place, after all, a point where roads meet but do not merge, where travelers pause but do not stay. It is neither origin nor destination, but something else entirely, a threshold between all the places it connects. Perhaps that is why strange things happen here. Perhaps that is why the boundaries are thin, and the old woman walked on top of the snow in the lantern bearer, showed me visions of accumulated light. In between places, the rules are different. The ordinary and the extraordinary exist side by side, separated by nothing more than a shift in attention. I went downstairs to tend the fire and found that the white candle on the mantel had burned brighter overnight. Or perhaps it only seemed brighter because the morning was so gray. Either way, its light filled the common room with a warmth that felt almost alive, almost intentional, as if the candle itself was trying to push back against the gloom. A family arrived today, unexpected and grateful. A husband and wife and their 3 children, traveling south from the northern settlements, fleeing something they did not want to name. I saw it in their eyes, the fear that lingers even after the immediate danger has passed. Whatever they left behind, it was not good. I gave them my best rooms and fed them until they could eat no more and did not ask any questions. Some stories are not ready to be told. Some wounds need time before they can be examined. I have learned this over the years. Learn to sense when a traveler needs to talk and when they need only silence and warmth. The children were quiet at first, wary, watching me with the careful eyes of young creatures who have learned that not all adults can be trusted. But by evening, they had begun to relax. The youngest, a girl of perhaps 5 years, asked me if she could help make bread, and I showed her how to knead the dough, her small hands pressing and folding beside mine. Her mother watched from the corner, and I saw tears in her eyes. Good tears, I think. The kind that come when you realize that kindness still exists, that the world is not entirely made of whatever darkness drove you from your home. They will stay for several days, the husband told me. They need to rest before continuing south. I told them they could stay as long as they needed, that the inn was theirs for however long they required it. That night, after the family had retired, I sat by the fire and thought about the lantern bearer again, about the travelers he finds in the darkness, the lost ones he guides back to the road. I thought about how he said that his lanterns know where they are needed, that they flicker when someone is lost. And I wondered if the same is true of this inn, if somehow, in some way, I do not understand, travelers know to come here when they need it most. If the light I carry reaches out into the darkness and draws them in, the same way his lanterns draw the lost. It is a comforting thought, or perhaps a troubling one. I am not sure which. The 17th day of the falling leaves moon, more or so today, heavier than before. The crossroads is blanketed in white, and the roads leading away from it are nearly invisible, hidden beneath drifts that grow deeper with each passing hour. The family will be staying longer than they planned, but they do not seem to mind. The children have discovered the joy of snow, and they spent most of the morning building small figures in the yard, while their parents watched from the window with something like relief on their faces. I used the day to write, to set down everything I remember about the lantern bearer and the old woman and the vision at the crossroads. I do not want to forget any of it. I do not want these memories to fade the way other memories fade, growing dim and uncertain with the passage of time. This journal is my own lantern, I think, my way of carrying light forward into the darkness of forgetting. When I'm gone, whoever takes over this inn will find these pages. They will read about the travelers who passed through, the stories that were told, the small mysteries that never quite resolved themselves into explanations. And perhaps reading them, they will understand what this place is, what it means to be the keeper of a crossroads, what it means to carry light. The 18th day of the falling leaves moon. The snow has stopped, and the world outside is transformed. Everything is white and silent, the kind of silence that settles over a landscape when it has been blanketed by snow. Even the wind seems muted, as if it does not want to disturb the peace. The family prepared to leave today now that the roads are passable again. They are heading south, toward the lowland settlements, toward whatever future awaits them there. The husband shook my hand and thanked me, his grip firm and warm despite the cold. The wife embraced me, which surprised me, and whispered something in my ear that I will not write here. It was too personal, too precious. Some words are meant only for the moment in which they are spoken. The children came to say goodbye last. The oldest, a boy of perhaps 10 years, gave me a small wooden figure he had carved during their stay. It was rough, clearly the work of young hands still learning their skill. But I could see what it was meant to be. A man standing at a crossroads, arms outstretched as if welcoming travelers from all directions. "For you," the boy said. "So you remember us?" I told him I would remember them always, and I meant it. I watched them go, their figures growing taller against the white landscape until they disappeared around a bend in the road. And then I came inside and placed the wooden figure on the mantel beside the white candle that never burns down. It looked right there, as if it had always been waiting for exactly that spot. The 19th day of the fallen leaves moon. The air smelled of coming soup this morning, that particular sharpness that announces a change in the weather before the clouds even gather. I have learned to read these signs over the years, the subtle messages the world sends to those who pay attention. A shift in the wind's direction, a change in the quality of light, the behavior of birds and beasts who seem to know what is coming long before we do. I spent the early hour splitting the last of the wood I had set aside for the week, adding it to the pile beside the kitchen door where it would be easy to reach when the snow began to fall. Physical work warms the body and settles the mind, and by the time I was finished, I felt ready for whatever the day might bring. A single traveler today, arriving just as the sun began to set, He was an old man, older than any I've seen in a long time, with a face so creased and weathered that it seemed to hold the memory of every road he had ever walked. He carried nothing but a walking stick and a small bundle slung over one shoulder, and he moved with the slow deliberation of someone who knows he does not have many more journeys left in him. I welcomed him in and sat him by the fire and brought him tea and soup, and he accepted everything with quiet gratitude. He did not talk much, this old man. He seemed content simply to sit and watch the flames, his eyes distant, as if he were seeing something far away and long ago. After a while, he looked at me and smiled. It was a gentle smile, full of something I could only call peace. "This is a good place," he said, "a good place to rest." I told him he was welcome to stay as long as he liked. He nodded slowly. "I think," he said, "I would like to stay for a very long time." And something in the way he said it made me understand that he was not talking about days or weeks or even months. He was talking about something else entirely, something I could not quite name, but could feel the same way I could feel the presence of all those travelers at the crossroads, the same way I could feel my father's approval in the shimmer of that strange night. He fell asleep by the fire, this old man, his breathing slow and steady, his face smoothed by rest. I covered him with a blanket and let him sleep, and I sat nearby, watching over him, carrying my light in the only way I know how. Some travelers come here to rest before continuing on their journey, and some travelers come here because their journey is ending and they need a place to stop. Both are welcome. Both belong here. The crossroads accepts them all. The 20th day of the falling leaves moon. The old man is still with us. He woke this morning with color in his cheeks and an appetite that surprised me, eating 3 helpings of porridge and 2 slices of honey bread before finally pushing his bowl away with a satisfied sigh. He told me his name is Aldrich, and that he has been walking the roads for longer than he can remember. He cannot recall where he started or where he was going. He only knows that he has been walking, and that somehow, after all these years, he has arrived here. I asked him if he has family somewhere, someone we should try to contact. He shook his head. "They're all gone," he said. "Everyone I ever loved is gone now, but that is all right. That is what happens when you live as long as I have. The world changes around you, and you are the only thing that stays the same." He looked at me with those ancient eyes. "But I am tired of staying the same," he said. "I am ready to change too." I did not know how to respond to this. I think he understood because he smiled and patted my hand and told me not to worry. "I am not afraid," he said. "I have walked through darkness before, and I have learned that there is always light on the other side, always." He spent the day sitting by the window watching the snow melt and the world slowly emerge from its white blanket. He seemed content, at peace, as if he had finally found something he had been searching for without knowing it. I wonder if this is what the lantern bearer meant about finding the lost. Not all of them are lost in the darkness of a forest or a mountain pass. Some are lost in other ways, wandering through years instead of miles, searching for something they cannot name until they finally find it. Perhaps the crossroads found Aldrich the same way the lantern bearers' lanterns find the travelers in the night. Perhaps it reached out to him across all those years of walking and drew him here to this place of rest, this gathering point for light. Perhaps this is where he was always meant to be. The 24th first day of the falling leaves moon. Aldrich passed in the night. I knew something was different. Even before I came downstairs, the inn felt quieter somehow, more still than usual, as if the very air was holding its breath. When I entered the common room, the fire had burned down to its lowest embers, casting barely enough light to see by, and the white candle seemed to glow with unusual intensity, as if it were trying to compensate for some other light that had gone out. I found him this morning still in his chair by the fire, the blanket pulled up to his chin, as if he had simply fallen asleep and decided not to wake up. His face was peaceful, more peaceful than I'd ever seen it. Whatever he had been searching for, I think he found it. I sat with him for a long time before doing anything else. Just sat there in the quiet of the morning with the fire crackling and the white candle burning steady on the mantel. I did not feel grief exactly. Oh, not only grief. I felt something else too. Something harder to name. A sense of rightness, perhaps. A sense that this was how it was supposed to be. He came to the crossroads because his journey was ending. And the crossroads welcomed him the same way it welcomes everyone and gave him a place to rest. I buried him this afternoon in the small plot behind the inn where my father also lies. I do not know if it is the proper thing to do, burying a stranger beside family, but Aldrich was not a stranger. Not really. Not anymore. He was a traveler who found his way here, and that makes him kin in the only way that matters. I carved his name on a simple wooden marker and placed it at the head of the grave. Aldrich, it says. Traveler, friend, and beneath that, the words he spoke to me on his last day. There is always light on the other side. I think he would have liked that. The 22nd day of the falling leaves, moon, the inn feels different now. Not emptier exactly, something else. As if Aldrich's presence has become part of the place itself, woven into the walls and the floorboards and the air. I catch myself glancing at the chair by the fire where he used to sit, half expecting to see him there, wrapped in his blanket, watching the flames with those ancient, peaceful eyes. But, of course, the chair is empty. It will be filled by other travelers, other stories, other journeys. That is the nature of an inn. People come and people go. The only constant is the welcome. I think I understand now why the lantern bearer showed me what he did, why he wanted me to see all those travelers gathered at the crossroads, all that light accumulated over years and decades and centuries. He was showing me what I am part of, what this place is part of. We are all lantern bearers in our own ways. We all carry light, whether we know it or not. And when we come together, when we pause at a crossroads and share our burdens and our hopes, our light grows stronger. It accumulates, it gathers, and it endures long after we ourselves have moved on. Aldrich's light is here now, added to all the others. My Father's light is here, the light of every traveler who has ever rested by this fire, eaten at these tables, slept beneath this roof. They are all here, gathered in the earth and the air and the ancient roots of the oak tree at the crossroads. And I am the keeper of all that light, the one who tends it and protects it and adds to it with every traveler I welcome. It is a sacred duty, I realize now, more sacred than I ever understood before, and I am grateful for it. Grateful for this inn and this crossroads and this strange, wonderful, mysterious life I have been given. The 23rd day of the falling leaves moon. A new traveler arrived today. She is young, barely out of childhood, with eyes that hold more sorrow than anyone her age should know. She gave her name as Wren and said she was traveling west, looking for work, looking for a new start after something terrible that she did not want to discuss. I gave her a room and fed her and did not ask questions. I could see she needed kindness more than curiosity, warmth more than words. She sat by the fire for most of the evening, staring into the flames the way Aldrich used to, and I wondered what she saw there, what ghosts haunted her, what shadows she was trying to escape. Before she went to bed, she looked at me with those sorrowful eyes and said something that caught me off guard. "It is bright here," she said, "brighter than anywhere I have been in a long time." I asked her what she meant. She shook her head as if she did not quite understand it herself. "Just bright," she said, "like there are more lights here than I can see." And I thought about the lantern bearer and the vision at the crossroads and all the accumulated light of all the travelers who have ever passed through, and I smiled. "Yes," I said, "there are. She is sleeping now, this young woman named Wren, and I am here, writing by the light of the white candle, carrying my own small flame into the darkness. Tomorrow she will continue west toward whatever future awaits her, and I will be here, tending the fire, keeping the light burning, waiting for the next traveler who needs a place to rest. It is what I do. It is who I am, the keeper of the crossroads, the guardian of the between time, the lantern bearer of this place, holding light for all who wander through the darkness. The 24th day of the falling leaves moon. Wren departed at first light, heading west as she had planned, but something had changed in her overnight. I could see it in the way she held herself, in the set of her shoulders as she gathered her few belongings. The sorrow was still there, yes. That kind of weight does not lift in a single night. But there was something else now, too, a determination, a quiet resolve. She thanked me for the warmth and the meal and the rest, and then she paused at the door and looked back at me with those young old eyes. "I dreamed of lights last night," she said, "hundreds of them gathered at the crossroads. and among them I saw my mother. She told me to keep walking. She told me the road ahead would be hard, but that I would not walk it alone. I did not know what to say. Dreams are strange things. Sometimes prophecy and sometimes memory, and sometimes simply the mind's way of making sense of things it cannot understand while awake. But the comfort on Wren's face was real, and that was what mattered. She walked out into the morning mist, her figure growing smaller with each step until she disappeared around the bend in the road. I stood at the door and watched her go, the same way I have watched so many travelers go, and I wished her well in my heart. Whatever awaited her in the west, I hoped she would find the new start she was seeking. I hoped the light she had dreamed of would guide her true. The rest of the day passed in quiet labor. I cleaned the room where Wren had slept, changing the straw on the mattress and airing out the blankets. I swept the common room and wiped down the tables and checked the stocks in the kitchen. The ordinary work of an inn, unremarkable and essential, the same tasks I perform every day without thinking. But today I found myself thinking about them, about the weight they carry, about the meaning they hold. Every time I make a bed, I am preparing a place for someone to rest. Every time I light the fire, I am creating warmth for someone who might be cold. Every time I stir the pot of stew that simmers on the hearth, I am making nourishment for someone who might be hungry. These are small things, yes, but small things accumulate. Small things matter. The lantern bearer understood this. His lanterns were small too. Just 2 points of light in all the vastness of the dark. But they were enough. They were enough to find the lost, to guide them back, to show them that someone cared enough to carry light on their behalf. I think that is what I do here. I carry light. Not in lanterns that I hold in my hands, but in fires I tend, and meals I prepare, and rooms I make ready for whoever might arrive. It is a different kind of lantern bearing, but it is lantern bearing all the same. The 25th day of the falling leaves moon. A messenger arrived this morning, racing through the crossroads on a horse whose breath steamed white in the cold air. He did not stop, this messenger. He barely slowed. But as he passed the inn, he raised his hand in greeting, and I raised mine in return. And for just a moment, our eyes met across the distance. I wonder where he was going, what urgent news he carried, whose life might change because of the words he bore. Messengers are always carrying something heavy, even when their satchels are light. The weight of expectation, of hope, of fear. The weight of news that someone is waiting to receive. News that might bring joy or sorrow or something in between. I watched until he disappeared down the southern road, and then I went back inside and tended to my work. In the afternoon, 2 travelers arrived together, though they had clearly not started their journeys together. They met on the road, they told me, a day's walk north of here, and had decided to travel the rest of the way in company. Safety in numbers, one of them said. The roads grow uncertain as winter approaches. They were unlikely pair. The first was a blacksmith, a broad man with arms like tree trunks and hands scarred by years of work with fire and metal. His name was Bertram, and he was traveling south to set up shop in one of the lowland towns where work was plentiful and the winters were milder. He carried his tools with him, wrapped in oilcloth and strapped to his back. Back, the implements of his trade too precious to leave behind. The second was a scholar, thin and pale, with spectacles that kept slipping down his nose and a satchel full of books that must have weighed nearly as much as he did. His name was Edmund, and he was traveling from one of the coastal academies to a monastery in the mountains, where ancient texts were said to be preserved from ages long forgotten. They sat together by the fire, these two, the blacksmith and the scholar, and they talked like old friends, despite having known each other for only a day. I listened as I worked, catching fragments of their conversation. Bertram told stories of the things he had made, swords and plows and delicate jewelry, each one a challenge and a joy. Edmund spoke of the texts he had studied, histories and philosophies and maps of places that might never have existed. What struck me was how much they had to learn from each other. Bertram was curious about the old writings, asking questions about what wisdom they contained, what secrets they might reveal about the way the world used to be. Edmund was fascinated by the craft of metalworking, wanting to understand how raw ore became beautiful objects, how fire and hammer and patience could transform the crude into the refined. This is what happens at a crossroads, I thought as I listened to them. People meet who would never have met otherwise. Ideas cross paths. Worlds intersect, and something new emerges from the intersection, something that could not have existed before. The blacksmith and the scholar slept in the same room that night, their pallets side by side, their snoring harmonizing in a way that made me smile when I walked past the door on my way to bed. They left together in the morning, heading in different directions, Bertram south and Edmund north. But they parted as friends, shaking hands warmly and promising to write if either ever learned the address of the other. The 26th day of the fallen leaves moon. The first real storm of the season arrived today. Not the gentle snowfall of recent days, but a true winter storm, with wind that howled around the corners of the inn and snow that fell so thick I could barely see the oak tree at the crossroads. The world beyond my windows became a blur of white, and I knew that no travelers would venture out in such weather. I spent the day by the fire reading from one of the books my father left behind. It is a collection of old tales, stories from the northern mountains and the eastern coasts and the western frontier, stories of heroes and monsters and magic that may or may not have been real. My father used to read from this book on winter nights, his voice rising and falling with the rhythms of the ancient words, and listening to him was one of the great comforts of my childhood. Now I read it to myself, and sometimes I speak the words aloud just to hear them fill the empty room. The stories feel different when you are the one reading them instead of the one listening. You notice things you missed before. You understand layers of meaning that passed you by when you were young. There is one story in particular that I return to today. It tells of a woman who carried a lantern across a great darkness, a darkness so deep and so vast that it seemed to have no end. She walked for years, this woman, with no companion but her lantern, no guide but its small flame. And when people asked her why she did not stop, why she did not rest, why she did not simply let the darkness have her, she always gave the same answer. "The light is not just for me," she would say. "The light is for whoever I might find. And as long as there is even a chance that someone is lost in this darkness, I will keep walking." I thought about the lantern bearer when I read this story. I wonder if he knows it. I wonder if it is about him or someone like him or someone he knew long ago. The story does not say what happened to the woman in the end. It simply ends with her still walking, still carrying her light, still searching for whoever might need to be found. Perhaps that is the right ending. Perhaps there is no ending for people who carry light. Perhaps they just keep walking forever through all the darkness the world can offer. The 27th day of the fallen leaves, moon, the storm has passed, leaving the world transformed. Snow lies heavy on everything, softening the edges of the landscape until it looks like something from a dream. The crossroads is nearly invisible beneath the white. The 4 roads marked only by the slight depressions where they lie beneath the drifts. I spent the morning digging paths from the inn to the stable, and from the stable to the woodshed, and from the woodshed back to the inn. Hard work, but satisfying. My breath plumed white in the air, and the cold bit at my fingers through my gloves. But there is something pure about physical labor in winter. It reminds you that you're alive, that you have a body that can move and work and make things happen in the world. In the afternoon, a cart arrived from the east, carrying a family I had met before. The Hendersons, farmers from one of the coastal settlements, traveling west to visit relatives for the winter festival. They had passed through here in the autumn on their way east, and I remembered them. The wife, Clara, had a laugh that filled the room, and the husband, Thomas, had a gift for whittling that he demonstrated by carving a small bird from a piece of scrap wood while waiting for his dinner. They remembered me too, which pleased me more than it should have. It is a small thing to be remembered, but it means something. It means that you have made an impression, that your light has touched someone else's life in a way that stayed with them. Clara insisted on helping me in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for the stew and kneading bread dough with practiced hands. We talked while we worked about the harvest and the weather and the news from the coastal towns. She told me about a lighthouse that had been built on the point near their village, a tall tower of stone that would guide ships safely into harbor on dark and stormy nights. A lighthouse, I thought, another kind of lantern bearing, another way of carrying light for those who might be lost. The Hendersons stayed the night, warm and comfortable in the private room, their children sleeping soundly after the long journey. In the morning, they continued west, their cart loaded with gifts for the relatives they were going to visit. Clara gave me a jar of honey before she left, honey from their own bees, amber and sweet. "I will think of you when I use it," I told her, and she smiled and said she would think of me when she returned. The 28th day of the fallen leaves moon. A solitary traveler today, a woman traveling alone from the west to the eastern coast. Her name was Miriam, and she was a midwife called to attend a difficult birth in one of the harbor towns. She had been walking for 3 days through the storm and the cold, determined to reach her destination in time. I marveled at her dedication. 3 days through a winter storm, alone for the sake of a woman she had never met. That is a kind of light carrying, surely. That is a lantern lifted against the darkness of fear and pain. She rested only long enough to warm herself by the fire and eat a quick meal. Then she was up again, gathering her bag of herbs and instruments, preparing to continue east. Before she left, I pressed a bundle of food into her hands, bread and cheese and dried meat, enough to sustain her for the rest of her journey. She thanked me, and there were tears in her eyes. Though she tried to hide them, "I have been so afraid," she admitted, "afraid I would not make it in time, afraid I would fail her, this woman who is counting on me." I told her what the lantern bearer had told me, that everyone carries light, that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is lift that light and let others see it. She looked at me strangely, the same way Eliza had looked at me when I said something similar. Then she nodded slowly, and something in her expression shifted. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I suppose that is what I'm doing." She walked out into the cold, heading east, her figure growing smaller against the white landscape until she disappeared. And I stood at the door and wished her well and hoped that she would arrive in time, and believed that she would. Some lights are too determined to be extinguished. The 29th day of the fallen leaves moon, a quiet day. No travelers, just the wind and the snow and the slow passage of hours. I used the time to write, to reflect, to sit by the fire and think about all that has happened since the lantern bearer arrived. It has been a strange few weeks, strange and wonderful and unsettling all at once. I have seen things I cannot explain and heard things I cannot forget and felt things I am still trying to understand. The vision at the crossroads, the old woman with her young eyes, Aldrich's peaceful passing, Wren's dream of lights. I do not know what any of it means. Not really. I do not know if I'm supposed to know. Perhaps meaning is something that reveals itself slowly over time. By the way, dawn reveals a landscape that was always there, but hidden by darkness. Perhaps I will understand more tomorrow, or next year, or in the moment of my own passing. For now, I am content to wait, to tend the fire and keep the light burning and welcome whoever arrives at my door. That is my purpose. That is my place. And I have learned these past few weeks that it is enough. The 30th day of the falling leaves moon, the moon that gave this month its name, is waning now, a thin crescent in the cold night sky. Tomorrow will be the first day of the long, dark moon, the deepest part of winter, when the nights are longest and the light is most precious. I find myself looking forward to it, this long, dark moon, not because I enjoy the cold or the darkness, but because I understand now what the darkness is for. It is the backdrop against which light becomes visible. Without darkness, we would not appreciate light. Without cold, we would not value warmth. Without loneliness, we would not treasure companionship. The crossroads understands this. It has always understood it. That is why it stands where it does, at the intersection of four roads, at the place where travelers must pause and choose and rest before continuing. It is a point of light in a vast and often dark world, and it has been so for longer than anyone can remember. I am honored to be its keeper, honored to carry on the work my father began, the work the old woman blessed, the work the lantern bearer revealed to me in all its quiet glory. Tonight, as the last night of the falling leaves moon draws to a close, I will light an extra candle, not the white candle, which burns always, but an ordinary candle, made of ordinary wax, with an ordinary wick. I will light it and set it in the window, a small beacon for any traveler who might still be on the road, a signal that there is warmth and welcome waiting for them here. It is a small gesture, but small gestures accumulate. Small lights gather, and together they can illuminate even the longest night. The fire settles into quiet embers as I write these final words. Outside, the wind whispers against the shutters, and somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once and falls silent. The white candle burns steady on the mantel, its flame unwavering, its light reaching out into the night. Beside it stands the wooden figure that the boy carved for me, a man at a crossroads, arms outstretched in welcome. I set down my pen and closed my journal. Another day recorded, another collection of moments preserved against the forgetting dark. Tomorrow will bring new travelers, new stories, new lights to add to the gathering at the crossroads. But for now, the inn is quiet, and I'm at peace. This is what the lantern bearer taught me. This is what Aldrich showed me in his final rest. This is what the crossroads has always known. We are all carrying light. We are all finding our way. And in the places where we pause, where we rest, where we share our warmth with strangers who become friends, that light grows stronger. It is growing stronger here in this inn at the crossroads. It has been growing for years, for decades, for as long as travelers have walked these roads and needed a place to stop. And it will continue to grow long after I'm gone long after the next keeper takes my place, and the next, and the next. Because that is what light does. It endures. It reaches out. It finds those who are lost and guides them home. And I am honored to be part of it. The candle in the window flickers gently, casting its small circle of warmth into the winter night. Somewhere out there, perhaps, a traveler sees it. Perhaps they turn their steps toward it, guided by its promise of shelter and rest. Perhaps they are the next story I will write in these pages, the next light to add to the gathering. Or perhaps no one comes tonight. Perhaps the candle burns for no one but the darkness itself, a gesture of defiance against the cold. Either way, I will light it. Either way, I will keep the fire burning. That is what lantern bearers do. Good night, dear traveler. May your dreams be gentle and your rest be deep. And when you wake, may you find your way filled with light, carried by all those who walked before you, burning steady against the darkness. Until tomorrow, until the next page, until the fire needs tending and the door needs opening and another weary soul needs welcoming, I will be here. The candle will be burning. The light will be waiting.
And now, dear listener, we leave the innkeeper to his rest. The fire burns low, the candle flame dances softly, and the crossroads lies quiet beneath the winter stars. Thank you for spending this time with us, for letting these words carry you into the gentle dark. If you found comfort here tonight, we hope you will return. There are always more pages in the diary, more stories waiting to be told, more lights gathering at the crossroads where four roads meet and travelers pause to rest their weary feet. Until then, rest well, dream deeply, and remember that somewhere on a road you may never walk, a lantern burns for you, carried by someone who knows that light is never wasted, never lost, never alone. Good night, and may your own light burn ever steady, ever bright, ever ready to guide the way home.